Close your eyes for just a moment. Maybe you can still smell it. The faint scent of your mother's perfume as she leaned over the kitchen table, setting down a warm plate at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. Maybe you can still hear it. The way your father turned the dial on the radio set, searching for something good after supper. Or maybe what comes back first is the sound of children's voices. Your voice, calling out across the street until the streetlights flickered on, because that was the rule and nobody ever questioned it. If any of that feels familiar, this one is for you, because today we are going back. All the way back to a decade that millions of Americans still call the greatest time this country has ever known. A time when front doors stayed unlocked, when the milkman knew your name, when the whole family gathered round a single television set in the living room and watched the same program together, laughing at the same jokes, at the same moment, in every home on the street. We are going back to the 1950s. And we are going to tell you exactly what it was really like to be there.
After years of suffering, the Great Depression, followed by the long and brutal years of World War II, America stepped out into a sunlit decade unlike anything the country had ever seen before. Millions of young men came home from overseas. They came home with medals on their chests, determination in their eyes, and one single dream burning in their hearts: to start a life, to get married, to have children, to own their own piece of American soil. And for the first time in this country's history, that dream was genuinely within reach. The GI Bill made it possible. Under that landmark legislation, returning veterans received low-interest home loans, college tuition benefits, and unemployment assistance. Men who had grown up poor, men who had watched their own fathers struggle all the way through the Depression, could now walk into a bank, sign their names on a line, and drive away with the keys to their very own house. Developers answered the call. On a former potato farm on Long Island, New York, William Levitt built what became the first great American suburb. Every house in Levittown looked nearly the same: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small yard out back, and they sold for around $7,000 each. Families lined up for miles to buy them. By the mid-1950s, the suburbs across America were expanding at a rate of 47%. Families left the crowded cities behind. They traded cramped apartment living for backyard barbecues and quiet streets where children rode bicycles freely and nobody worried about where they had been. The station wagon appeared in driveways everywhere. Life had order. Life had rhythm, and for the first time in a long time, life felt genuinely, deeply safe. Step inside one of those suburban homes, and you would find a world built entirely around the family. The kitchen was the heart of everything, not simply the room where food was prepared, but where the family actually lived. Morning toast, homework spread across the table after school, card games on rainy Saturday nights. The breakfast nook became an American institution, a built-in corner with vinyl bench seating and a chrome-edged formica table at the center. Mothers were up before anyone else in the house. Breakfast was made fresh. The family sat down together before the day began, and that was simply the way it was done. New appliances arrived every year: refrigerators in pastel colors, automatic washing machines, electric dryers, and in the living room, the furniture was arranged around the newest marvel of them all, the television set. By 1948, only 2% of American households owned one. By 1960, that figure had reached nearly 90%. In just 12 years, Television had transformed from a novelty into an absolute necessity, the screen that united the nation. If you lived through the 1950s, you remember what it felt like the first time your family brought home a television set. Maybe your father carried it in on a Saturday afternoon, and the whole neighborhood came over to stare at it. Maybe you sat on the floor in front of that screen for hours, not quite believing that pictures and voices could come out of a wooden box. The show that stopped America cold every Monday night was I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz debuted on CBS in October of 1951, and within a single season, they were the most beloved couple in the country. On January 19, 1953, the episode Lucy Goes to the Hospital aired. That same night, 44 million households, nearly 3 out of every 4 television-owning homes in America, tuned in. It was the highest-rated single television episode in American history at that point. The following morning, more people had watched Lucy give birth than had watched President Eisenhower be inaugurated. Then there was the Ed Sullivan Show. Every Sunday night, Americans gathered to watch Ed Sullivan present a parade of talent unlike anything else on television. When Elvis Presley appeared on September 9, 1956, the broadcast captured over 82% of the television audience. The cameras showed Elvis only from the waist up that night because network executives were concerned about what his stage movements might mean for the sensibilities of American living rooms. The woman of the house. The roles inside the American home were clearly drawn. The father left for work in the morning, 5 days a week, in his gray flannel suit. He came home at 6. Dinner was on the table. The house was in order. The mother ran everything else. She prepared the meals, managed the household budget, kept the children's schedules straight, and maintained the home to a standard the neighbors would find respectable. Women's magazines published elaborate guides on the art of being the perfect housewife, how to greet a husband at the door, how to keep the children quiet during the evening news.
But the women of the 1950s were far more resourceful than those magazine pages suggested. A divorced mother from Detroit named Brownie Wise discovered that nobody was buying Earl Tupper's innovative plastic containers from store shelves. So she began selling them at home parties, friendly neighborhood gatherings where women came together over punch and cookies, watched product demonstrations, and placed their orders. Her sales numbers were so extraordinary that Earl Tupper made her vice president of the newly formed Tupperware home parties. By the mid-1950s, an estimated 90% of American homes owned at least one piece of Tupperware. The children. If you were a child growing up in 1950s America, your world bore almost no resemblance to the world children know today. School was serious. You sat up straight. You raised your hand before you spoke. After the final bell rang, children went outside and stayed outside until the streetlights came on, riding bicycles, playing stickball in the alley, organizing elaborate games with every child on the street. No adult supervised any of it. Nobody needed to. But school in the 1950s carried one dimension no other generation of American children has ever experienced. Beginning in the early 1950s, classrooms across the country began conducting a new kind of drill. The federal government, responding to the Soviet Union's first nuclear test in 1949, created the Federal Civil Defense Administration and released an educational film featuring an animated turtle named Bert. The film instructed children to drop beneath their desks and cover the backs of their necks with both arms. Millions of school children watched that film, then practiced the drill in their actual classrooms. Some schools distributed metal identification tags to their students so that in the event of a real nuclear attack, their bodies could be identified in the wreckage. Every child in 1950s America grew up with that knowledge sitting quietly in the back of their mind. Diners and drive-ins. Despite the Cold War's long shadow, the texture of daily life had a warmth that is almost impossible to overstate. Nowhere was that warmth more present than inside the American diner. Chrome and neon and formica, diners lined the highways, anchored town centers, and served the food America genuinely loved: hamburgers and meatloaf, fried fish on Fridays, and pie for dessert. Behind the counter ran the soda fountain, that long gleaming counter with swivel stools where teenagers gathered after school and old-timers sat over coffee for long, unhurried hours. At drive-in restaurants, car hops, often teenage girls, came out to your car window to take your order and returned carrying a tray that hooked over your car door. In 1955, at Ray Kroc's first McDonald's franchise, a hamburger was 15 cents. A milkshake was 20 cents. Rock and roll. The decade that opened with Glenn Miller ended with Elvis Presley, and the distance between those 2 points was nothing short of enormous. In 1954, Elvis Presley walked into Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee, and recorded his first song. His sound was unlike anything the radio had heard before. Southern country music fused with the raw power of the blues. By 1956, Heartbreak Hotel sat at the top of the pop charts. Girls screamed at his performances. Boys copied his ducktail hairstyle and his loose, open-collared shirts. Parents across the country were alarmed.
Radyo istasyonları müziğini yayınlamayı reddetti. Florida'daki Jacksonville bölgesindeki bir yargıç, bir şov sırasında vücudunu salladığı için onu tutuklamakla tehdit etti. Ama gençler umursamıyordu. Ceplerinde paraları vardı. Daha önceki gençliklere göre daha fazla harcanabilir gelire sahiptiler ve bunu kendi kendilerine harcadılar. 1950'li yılların sonlarına doğru Amerikan şirketleri her yıl 10 milyon portable plakçalar satıyordu. Rock'n'roll Voyguk.
There is something about daily life in the 1950s that is almost painful to put into words for someone who was not there to feel it firsthand. It was the sense, genuine and widespread, that the country was moving towards something good, that the sacrifices of the Depression years and the long war years had meant something real, that the morning after all that darkness had arrived, and it was brighter than anyone had dared to hope. Men came home from their union jobs on Friday afternoons and mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings, and there was a quiet satisfaction in the sound of that lawnmower, in the smell of fresh-cut grass, in the small patch of ground that was yours and no one else's. Women gathered on each other's porches in the afternoon. They talked about children and recipes and the new family that had moved in from out of state. They organized church suppers, PTA meetings, and 4th of July block parties where every household brought a covered dish and the children ran in the yards until long after dark. On Sunday nights, the whole family watched the Ed Sullivan Show together. On Saturday afternoons, the children went to the matinee and watched a double feature for a quarter. In the summer, the drive-in was the destination of choice. Car windows down, the screen blazing against the night sky, the smell of popcorn drifting across the parking lot. And when the summer was long and golden, families loaded the station wagon and drove out on Route 66, stopping at roadside diners and motor courts along the way, the American landscape rolling past the windows while the radio played, and the world felt, for those few weeks on the road together, absolutely right. That was 1950s America. It was not perfect in every corner. It was not fair to every American who lived in it, but it was alive, warmly, unmistakably alive, in a way that everyone who was there carries with them still. The belief that ordinary life, a steady job, a clean home, a family dinner at 6 o'clock, and a neighborhood where everyone knew your name was something worth having, worth working for, worth remembering. Today, we have walked through those years together, through the Levittown streets and the soda fountain counters, through the living rooms lit by I Love Lucy, through the schools where children ducked beneath their desks, and the drive-ins where teenagers fell in love over shared milkshakes. If something in this brought something back for you,
A smell, a sound, a face from long ago. Please leave your memory in the comments below, because those memories matter. They always will. Thank you for watching Timeless American Memories.